What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I go through the process of showing you how I built my second ever set of cornhole boards. The first set that I ever built was a smaller version, and it was made out of 2x4s. This was made out of plywood, all plywood, one full sheet of plywood. The first set I built for me and my wife years before I did any of this woodworking stuff. And the second set was for a friend of mine for a birthday from his wife. I got the matching bags to match. They turned out awesome. Stick around to the end of the video to see the pictures of that. Also, anything dimension wise or material wise, I'll leave that down in the description down below for you to check out. If you have any additional comments or questions, please just leave them down in the comments and I'll get right to them. So without wasting any time, let's get into the video, and I hope you enjoy and stick around to the end. To start the project off, I used a 3/4 inch full sheet of plywood. I ripped it down on the floor just to make it easier to manage. Right after that, I started ripping everything down to 2.5 inch pieces for the frame. I've seen 3.5, I've seen 3, I've seen 4.5 inch pieces for the frame. I decided to go with 2.5 to make it nice and light and you know, a little more easier to move around. One thing I want to mention is the frame did not actually measure 2 feet by 4 feet just like the tops. I cut these down a little shorter, so it was basically a 1/2 inch from each edge into the frame. After all the rips were done, I started cutting everything down to size. So I had 2 long pieces, 2 short inner pieces, 3 short inner pieces actually, and then 2 legs, and then I had a brace between each of the legs. So I did that for both of the boards. Here you can see a quick mock-up of it. You can see all the pieces that I had. Then I started laying out all the pocket hole locations. Nothing too specific with the pocket hole locations. I just kind of, you know, evenly distributed a good, you know, amount of spacing between them. Kind of went overboard with them, so I didn't end up using every single pocket hole location that I made. Here you see me transferring everything to the equivalent pieces, just mirroring everything. And then I pulled out my Massca M2 Pro pocket hole jig. Here I set up the depth of the material I was using at 3/4. I set the jig to 3/4 as well. Then I grabbed the step gauge, set that to 3/4 as well, and then you install your drill bit and your stop collar. You lock the stop collar in place with the Allen key. And after that, everything was set up. I had all my locations marked off, so next thing was just have at it. I didn't have my dust collection hooked up at the moment. I was just trying to see if everything was going to measure out perfectly for the test piece. Make sure all the pocket holes didn't go too far down, and I got all my measurements and settings just right. Making all these pocket holes was super easy with this jig. I'll leave a link in the description down below for this specific jig, and you can also check out all of the other Massca tool products. Next thing was to lay out everything, make sure the pocket holes were oriented the right way. Didn't want to have one of these pieces going upside down and me having to undo it all. So the frame itself was also put together with pocket holes, and then the frame attaches to the tops with pocket holes. So here I'm just attaching everything, making sure everything's nice and square. Trying not to mess up in any way, making sure everything stays nice and put together. We're using clamps. I'll also leave some measurements of everything that I used down in the description as well. Here's that metal brace. This one measures just the same dimensions as the outer 2 braces. Like I said, I'll leave all the lengths that I use down below. After that, I went to the legs and I just added some rounding over the corners. Then I took those over to the bandsaw, and after that, I take them over to the my oscillating tool just to sand them down pretty good. You don't necessarily have to use a bandsaw. You can use a jigsaw, you can use, a regular hand saw, you can use a scroll saw, but since I had a bandsaw, I just went ahead and used that for convenience purposes. Same thing with the oscillating tool. You can use a regular palm sander if you have one. Next thing on the list was to make the actual cornhole board holes. These measure to the center of the board, which would be 12 inches, and then 9 inches from the top. The hole itself, the diameter is actually at 6 inches. I don't have any hole saws that measure 6 inches, so I just kind of used a compass and made some marks and just went around, and then I went around slowly using my jigsaw, making sure to not have to do too much sanding. As you see here, I'm just kind of sanding the inside and making it nice and smooth. Then I added a round over to both sides on each board. And since I had that round over, I went ahead and rounded over all of the edges on each of the boards, the top, the bottom, and both sides. Well, all the sides, I guess. Next thing I did was drill the holes for the legs to attach them using the bolts and the wing nuts. I also used some washers just to add some spacing in there and make sure everything glides smoothly. Here I'm drilling the holes on the frame itself, make sure everything's a nice fit. Same thing on the other side. I use that one scrap piece as the spacer, and then I attached another scrap piece on the back side, and I secured it with a clamp just so there wouldn't be any punch through or tear out on the other side. Gave the tops a nice little sand on the edges and the tops. After that, it was time to lay out the lines for the painting and the staining. As far as these boards go, it was just painting. No, my bad. It was just staining. Here you see me just using a straight edge, just trying to get my lines nice and straight. I used the green frog tape for the stain because I feel like it does a better job than just regular blue painter's tape at getting more crisp lines whenever you're doing stain. As far as staining goes, I also use a pre-stain, so I went ahead and pre-stained everything. And for the stain, it can be a little tricky whenever you're trying to make crisp lines and edges with some stain. So I just very carefully started in the middle, away from the edges of the tape. And then I later came on with the stain and just lightly coated it here and there until it made, until it started matching the actual top. So for these boards, there was 2 different colors of stain, 3 actually. There was a brown, there's a gray, and then there's a bluish green. I'll leave a link to those colors down in the description as well, so you can go check them out for yourself. So after that, after those 2 stain coats, I removed the tape, and then I reapplied some tape to make another line, and this will be the brown stain, just to add, a little more contrast and addition to color. After I let that dry, I went ahead and stained that, and then I sanded the actual frames themselves. Then I went about attaching everything, making sure there was a 1/2 inch of overhang from the tops from the actual frames. Then I just added pocket holes, and like I said earlier, I didn't use every single pocket hole location, and that only goes for the long pieces. All the other ones, the 3 middle brace pieces, I did use every single hole location, but not for the sides. And for the bottom, I used a different color stain. This one's just a natural color stain to just to give it a little bit of color, nothing crazy. And an additional thing that I did was add some vinyl. Those white strips that you see is actual vinyl. Actually, vinyl is not paint. I figured that'd be the easiest route to go. And then after that, I also had some vinyl cutouts for the decal that they wanted. The original decal said Lake Life, but I had my wife help me out with the decal making. And my friends needed, well, it was requested that it say Res Life, so she whipped that up real quick for me. And for the legs were a little tricky, but I have seen this trick done using a gallon of paint. So you just basically elevate the board with a gallon of paint underneath, and you measure it out to the appropriate height that you need. I believe it's 12 inches. Then you let your legs just overhang from the workbench. Then you mark your straight line across. You make your cuts, and then everything should be nice and square. It can be a little tedious getting the angles right and everything and the height, but just take it slow, be patient. After everything measured out just right, I went ahead and marked the line straight across, and I took both pieces, well, all 4 pieces, over to the miter saw. After the legs were done and everything had dried, I added some polyurethane to the top. I added 2 thick coats. After the polyurethane had dried, I flipped the boards over and added the brace for the legs. This was the most difficult part, just because you're wanting to have to hold everything together. I decided that it would be best to just take the legs off and measure down a good height. I can't remember the exact measurement. I want to say it was maybe 6 inches down to the middle of each leg, and at that point, that's where I added the brace. After I added the brace, I had to finagle everything to make sure the legs would fit back onto the board itself. And here I'm just hammering away at the bolts, trying to get them to sit a little further down into the boards. And there you go. The same thing for the other board, and it turned out real good. And that's about it, guys. The only other thing was I added my brand to the inside of the leg supports, as you can see in this picture. Thought that was a nice touch for whenever they're closed up and they're just kind of hanging out. And here are some other pictures of the boards as well. And that's the end of the video, guys. Just a quick video of how I make my cornhole boards. This is actually only my second set that I've ever made. The first set I made for me and my wife, maybe like 4 years back. This was before I even did a whole bunch of the woodworking stuff. But yeah, hopefully you can follow along to that video. If you have any questions, just comment down below. I'll have the dimensions and stuff of what I used down in the description. I really appreciate you guys stopping by and watching the video. I'll leave links to my other social medias in the description as well. Be sure to go follow me on TikTok, on Instagram, where my main stuff is. I'll also have a Facebook page if you want to check it out. But yeah, guys, the channel steadily keeps growing. We're sitting at about 300 and something subscribers at the moment, and I want to say thank you to everybody that just kind of supports the channel. If you have any kind of questions for anything, not even just this project, just leave them down in the comments down below, and I'll be sure to get to you. Again, thank you for watching the video, and I'll see you on the next one.